name is Steve Caliper. I'm serving as a lead ambassador to the Trust. And David, it's certainly exciting to see you today. We're looking forward to our conversation on our Wednesday stories. And we know we've got a number of folks that are joining us online this morning to be a part of this discussion and conversation. David, just to get started, just conversationally as we get people to settle in, where are you today and how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm at the Special Forces Charitable Trust offices. We're located in Essex, Connecticut. A little hot today, but we're supposed to get a thunderstorm, so hopefully that'll cool it off. And we're just carrying out our mission of trying to help out the families of Green Berets.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's amazing that you've been in this role in the service for a number of years. David, for those that are maybe just getting to know the Trust, share with us, if you would, how does the Special Forces Trust serve the SF families and the troops? Just kind of give us an overview of the mission of the organization and how do you serve those that are serving us?
Right. Our mission is to provide sustainable and meaningful programs to the Special Forces community, Green Berets. We have 3 program areas: education, motivation, family and community, and veterans and heritage. Probably about 60% of our money goes to the family and community. Anything from our signature retreat programs, where we take 70 families away for a 3-day weekend, where we bring in speakers that just the chaplains don't have access to or can't get access to. And then education motivation, we provide scholarships to spousal scholarships. And under veterans and heritage, if there's an SF veteran that needs help, we will provide up to a $2,500 scholarship for them from that standpoint. So that's kind of the program area.
David, give us a sense, and I know you're not a part of the Special Forces yourself, but you know it well and intimate with a number of men that serve on our behalf of our incredible country. Share with us, if you would, how many men are currently in service? Where in the world are they? Tell us a little bit about what's going on from your vantage point.
So there are about 6,500 Green Berets. At any one time, a little over 3,000 are forward deployed. They every night they're in different countries, but it averages about 65 to 75 countries. So the separation and the deployment cycle is such that they're separated from their families quite a bit during the year. And then, of course, when they come back, they've got training, so that's further separation. So we try to provide the tools on these retreats, especially that's our big thing. We try to provide the tools to deal with that separation. When the husband comes back, how that reintegration is, after being away for 6 months. Maybe Mike can talk a little bit about reintegration, where certain things are being done one way, and he comes in and decides to change it another way. So anyway, that's what we try to do, and that's what's going on.
Yeah, well, David, as we know, being married and marriage is hard, regardless. And then when you're away for months at a time and you're not connected, or maybe that you've had to go silent because of what you're called to do in the field, coming back and reconnecting husband and wife as well as with your kids has got to be a challenge. Mike Rose, welcome. We're honored to have you with us today, sir, and thank you for your services to our country. We just want to get to know you. If you would take a couple of moments and just share with us a little bit about you, and we look forward to hearing a little bit about your story today as well.
Well, I'm married to Margaret now for 49 years. I've got 3 children, 2 grandchildren. Live here in Huntsville, Alabama, and I've been retired fully for 10 years, and I spend most of my time either doing something with my grandkids, or since we lost their father about a little over 4 years ago, as active duty Marine, too much trauma. Anyway, sorry about the dog. And
we love dogs and pets.
And then I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus, both my council and my assembly, And I spend a good portion of my time doing charity work with them, participating in like the backpack program. We have a program here, and I'm sure some of you might be familiar with it. It's primarily us able churches that pack food, 3 days worth of food, so the teachers in public schools can stuff those packs in the kids' backpacks so they have something to eat during the weekend. Otherwise, when they come to school on Monday, they're pretty much hungry. So we do that, and I deal with the Rose Assurance, which feeds a lot of the homeless, especially the chronic homeless. I raise money for various charities through the Knights of Columbus, and I also do gift speaking and as a speaker at fundraisers for various organizations like the AUSA, several different churches in town that are having events to raise money for their charity programs, and then I help wherever I can.
Fabulous. Well, you got a fabulous heart and a demeanor, and you're a do-gooder. We appreciate your services in your community. Mike, if you would honor us with sharing with us a little bit about how you served our country, when and where. We just want to get to know a little bit about how you served in the field, and your being honored by a Medal of Honor recipient. I think that's a pretty big deal, and we salute you and thank you. Share with us a little bit about your active duty.
Well, I entered the Army in '67, April '67, and I went to basic training in Fort Ord. And I had the reason I joined the Army was because I was in a draft board they weren't in North Hollywood, which was an older area, and there were very few young eligible persons that could go in the service, so they were denying deferments, and I was running out of money for college, so I went into the Army. I joined after talking to my dad. He told me, if you're going to join the Marine Corps, join the Marine Corps, but I don't recommend, based on his experience being in the Marine Corps in 1942, so at Parris Island. So, and then the Navy, I'm just not thrilled about saltwater. Great service, love them. And the Air Force, you couldn't get in the Air Force back then. They had a 2-year waiting list for enlisting. And the Coast Guard, forget it. They were, and then of course they're saltwater too. So I'm not exactly thrilled with saltwater. So I opted to join the Army, and one of the few things they had open at the time was infantry. So I went infantry and airborne. And while I was at Fort Gordon, Georgia, which was at that time an infantry training center, which I think now is Signal or something like that. Anyway, this guy, in those days, they tell you, sergeant comes in and says, you're going down to take a test. Okay. So you go down and you take a test. You do what you're told, right? So, but I took the test, this test they gave me, and about a week later, about 5 or 6 of us got called into a formation, and we were told to go down. We're being taken down to this building. We sit in this room, and this individuul who looked like a recruiting poster with a green beret came in, and I had no idea what they were, and they wanted us to take another test. So we took another test, and I didn't think anything of it. And then when I graduated from AIT infantry at Fort Gordon, I thought I was going to go to jump school and probably Vietnam, right? Oh no. They sent me up to Fort Bragg after jump school. And then when I got to Fort Bragg, guess what they were going to do? They give you another test, right? So you go through the initial training, and then they tell me I'm going to be a medic. And I said, a medic? Okay, whatever. So I spent about the better part of a year going through training as a medic. There's some downtime between the various phases. And I was in the 7th at Fort Bragg for about 6 months or so. Then I got orders for Thailand, and I went and did mostly civic action, which really, for me, was a great training because while I was in Thailand, I was up north, and so I saw a lot of, like typhoid and typhus and various different infections. And I had to run my own lab. I learned a lot about lab, and you would also see a lot of injuries like axe wounds and things that would be a week old by the time they got to you. And so you really learned a lot of your trade. I hate to say this, somewhat on the job, because there's a big difference from being in medical training and then like going to an emergency room in the United States where everything is nice and sterile and the injuries are coming in that are only an hour old or a half hour old. Now you're looking at stuff that's a week old and stuff, and it's infected and it needs, so I learned a lot in Thailand. And then after a year in Thailand, I got orders for MACSOG. I go to MACSOG, and I go on my first missions, and then the second mission, which was Tailwind, and those kind of missions we went on were kind of exciting, I should say, and which most people know about Tailwind, so there's no point in going to that. And then when I wasn't in the field, I was working in the our dispensary there, and we held sick call for our guys, which very few of them really were sick. But we spent, 4 or 5 medics in there. And I bet we'd see from about 7 in the morning till about noon, gosh, probably 200 people come through there, which is why I never understood why you have to wait so long in an emergency room or to see a doctor at a hospital there in the state. I mean, as many, and we were processing, cuts and fevers, and oh my God, the guy's got typhus or typhoid or plague. So it wasn't like we weren't busy in that period of time and during the day. And so that's what I did. And then we also had a Catholic charity hospital there near Khartoum. And Pat Smith, who was from, I think, Washington State, she also had an X-ray machine. Well, she had a problem with supplies and fuel for the generators. So we used to take fuel and blankets, and I would get pallets shipped to me sometimes with, antibiotics that were like a week or 2 away from expiring. Well, you can't use them on U.S. personnel, but she would take them and use them. I mean, it's better than nothing. And but what was great about the relationship we had with her is when we had some of our women come in, and if we didn't think they could make it to Pleiku, we would take them there, and she would stabilize them. And then the other beautiful thing was that when we shipped them out of her place, they went with X-rays or a diagnosis, which I think in the long run was a life-saving thing. Great organization there in Khartoum.
Mike, share with us, if you would, Tailwind. You touched on it, and let's not assume that everyone listening in or part of this conversation is familiar with it. You could take us back there and just kind of give us a quick snapshot of what Tailwind is and your role in that.
Well, I was the one medic, and there were 16 of us Americans and 120 mountain yards. And I will be honest with you, I would say probably 3/4 to 80% of what I know about Tailwind I've learned since 1998 because it was classified. And I'm a Sergeant E5, and so I was only told what I needed to know. And one of the things I'll never forget is our first sergeant Adair, God rest his soul, he said, whatever you take, multiply it by a factor of like 10 or something like that. And I knew the other guys were just loading up on ammunition and what have you. And I'm thinking, I'm not stupid. I'm saying, oh crap, this does not bode well for whatever somebody's got planned for us. But basically what it was, there was a CIA operation going up north of Shabno in Laos. and it wasn't going well. So they wanted a distraction or a demonstration, I'm not sure what the modern term is, to hopefully to pull some of the Pathet Lao and NBA or whatever was up there south toward us to give them some relief so their mission could be successful. And I understand it ultimately was successful. But from what I've learned later is we think that the NBA thought that it was a major incursion by the U.S. into that area in Laos. And from what I understand, it was the deepest that we ever went into Laos as far as mileage from Vietnam. And so from when we crossed that line, I don't know what that line, if it probably wasn't the border, we started taking ground fire all the way to our insertion point. And then basically we spent the next 4 days trying to get out of there. We had, and they were coming at us big time. The Air Force, I understand, was having a field day. They were actually catching them on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, trucking troops down toward us. So we basically were in a long 96-hour firefight. And what was amazing, we took a lot of casualties, but we only lost 3 killed, thank God. And that, those 3 were Montagnards. And the one thing about that whole thing, it bothers me today that I'm the one who said, leave them. We did I was concerned with the wounded and the living, so you can't, and we were on a point of exhaustion, weren't sleeping, we're basically eating minimally and drinking water. So you got to be concerned with the people that are alive, and sometimes that no person left behind thing just doesn't quite work. It's unfortunate, but you get in those circumstances. But it has bothered me because I don't know if those gentlemen were Buddhist or Catholic, but they were never returned to their family. They never got their traditional or their religious burial, and they basically were left where they fell. We tried carrying them, but we just, I realized it just was too
much.
hard.
Yeah. Mike, you know, you're a recipient of a Medal of Honor, and we are certainly grateful for your service. Again, thank you. To the best that you feel comfortable, would you share with us a little bit about the events that took place and why you received the Medal of Honor? What was it that recognized you? What was it that you did that recognized you to receive such an honorable award?
Well, most of what I know is because people told me from the eyewitness reports. Apparently, I was going out and picking people up and dragging them to safety while being shot at. And I will be honest with you, I don't, you know, I remember going out and pulling one guy back behind a log with Bernie Bright. And Bernie said something to me, the fact, he said, didn't you see that machine gun? And I looked down and said, what are you talking about? I had no clue. I was oblivious to it. I was so focused on what I was supposed to be doing that it's not that you ignore what's going on, but you focus on the task that you're assigned. And as the wounded started mounting, I got really busy. And so you follow what's going on to the extent that you keep moving in conjunction with the unit, but I'm not paying attention to who's shooting or what's going on and so on and so forth like that. You concentrate on what your job is. And and I get asked this question sometimes, well, weren't you afraid? Well, when you're going in, your stomach is, and there's that, I can't describe that feeling. I don't know if it's fear, but once you get in there and you start doing your thing, you can't worry about getting hurt or killed, or because I can guarantee if you worry about it, you probably will be. But it's the after effect. I will tell you, you do shake, and people get sick to their stomach, and there are other issues that occur.
It sounds like it was a highly intense moment the adrenaline kicks in, the intensity, and then your training just goes into gear.
And I will tell you that the reason I was able to do what I was started in basic training at Fort Ord, AIT Infantry, and all the training I had in Special Forces, and the things that I learned working with senior medics in Thailand, up north in the northern part of Thailand. And you concentrate on your training, and then you continue to train constantly over and over, and you practice things. You look at sand tables, you look at maps, you look at this, and you focus on the job at hand. And then we had extremely great leadership with Captain McCarley and First Sergeant Adair. I mean, those terrific individuals. Unfortunately, we've lost both of them now. They both went in their upper 80s, but they had a good life, but they were really, and then both of them, like a lot of us, they continued in community service for years and years and years. But
Mike,
that's why I think that's why I was able to do what I was able to do, is because all those people that I had come in contact when I joined the military, that, you know, take responsibility, learn what you can, be the best you can, and train and train and train. So when the rubber meets the road, you're ready to go.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll pause for just 1 second. Mike, thank you again for your story and sharing the openness of the events that's taken place in your life. And again, we honor you. David Guernsey, let me invite you back into this conversation and see if there's anything that you want to add to this as it relates to the Special Forces Trust. We've got a question in chat, but let me let you speak in and see if you have any questions for Mike as well.
No, we held a reception for Mike in DC when he got it, and there's a picture which I did furiously try to find with about 30 people there, and you know, the evacuation that Mike talks about, but he had a rough time getting out because, as he says, he was trying to get the wounded and the living out, and you know, the third time he hops on a Marine helicopter and it takes fire, it crashes. He saves everybody in that Marine helicopter. I think you had at that time several bullets in your body, but I don't know, Mike. I know that we've talked about this several times, but the extraction for 96 days of fighting, and then just as his job as a medic. Well, 96 hours. It could be, yes, I'm sorry, not 96 days. I apologize. 96, you know, 12 hours. I can't fathom, you know, 2 hours. So, so it's remarkable, and how it all came about, and really, it's also an honor that I think it started with the Bush administration, carried through the Obama administration, that some of the people that had won the Distinguished Service Cross, which is the second highest medal, needs to be reviewed. And his case was reviewed and was awarded the Medal of Honor by the Obama administration. So it is well deserved. And Mac V. Sog actually was another, go read about it. It was, you know, what wasn't supposed to be happening. If anybody died that way, the United States would disavow them. And I'm not a true historian on that, but we still have people like Mike around that can talk about that. So anyway, Mike, you're great.
Mike Rose, thank you. We salute you and thank you for being with us today, sir. Thank you. David Guernsey, if you would take a moment and share with us, how can somebody that's listening into this conversation be a part of supporting the Special Forces Trust for those that are active as well as retired members of the SF? That's your role, that's your mission, as we heard Mike's mission today. What tells us a little bit about the mission and how can we be involved with supporting the trust? I know for me, I went on and the Special Forces was right there, and within a couple of days you received the funds. How can somebody get involved with supporting your mission?
Right. So we have several events that we do throughout the year that is on our website, www.specialforcescharitabletrust.org. You can make an online contribution. You can send us a check. Obviously, we can't do anything without the support of people, and we have some wonderful supporters that allow us to do the programs that we do. We lost a couple of Green Beret Medal of Honor recipients recently. Betty Atkins, who is also from Alabama, and Ron Shore, who's 40 years old, has 2 young children, died of cancer. In both cases, we're supporting the funerals at Arlington with the reception. We also supported the Atkins family. His uniform is actually going to 5th Group that he got his Medal of Honor in. He needed a uniform to be buried in with all the medals, and the trust provided that uniform to his daughter so that he'd have the uniform to be buried in. But that doesn't happen without support. So contributions are welcome, and that's what is the fuel that keeps us going. And we did get one question that, Mike, I'm going to answer for you because I think I know the answer. You know, did you serve with Gene McCarley? And the answer is yes. And you did serve with Gene. Correct, Mike? I am right.
Yeah, he's the. In fact, it's funny how, you know, he was a captain and I was just a plain old lowly sergeant. We became friends, and we remained friends until his death. It'll be 2 years this November. In fact, I gave the eulogy at his funeral, and I also did the eulogy for Colonel Sadler, who was the overall MAC SOG commander at the time. With God bless him, I think he called in every chip that was owed him to get us out. And so there have been some tremendous individuals associated with Special Forces, great men. And unfortunately, you know, with aging out, we're losing them. And but McCarley was a lot of people don't know this. He was a volunteer fireman, and he had qualified on the jaws of life, and he ran that kind of operation there in Wilmington area until he got, quote, too old to handle the machine, and then he became the dispatcher. So he continued to serve all the way to his death. So to me, he's one of the greatest men I've ever met. And those of us that served with him in Vietnam, even though he made lieutenant colonel, we still call him captain, and you know he answered to that.
Wonderful.
Good man.
Mike, again, thank you. We appreciate all that you've done and continue to do. David Guernsey, thank you for your leadership on behalf of the trust and for those being cared for through your mission, those in the field, families, marriages, and the reunification of families. As we mentioned earlier in the call, it's intentional to be married successfully, let alone being in an active Special Forces role and the intensity of the job, and then to be a husband and a wife and be kids. And so what you do on behalf of the trust is well received. We want to continue to lift up you in prayer and all that you do, as well as support you financially. So thank you, David, for all that you do.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a great day. We appreciate that you've taken some time to be with us today on behalf of the Special Forces Trust. Have a great day. God bless. And we appreciate you joining in. Thank you so much.
Take care.